Okay guys, this is the second of 4 modules on weight bearing. Now if you watched the first module, it was basically about why we have a skeleton. And we came up with some important features. We talked about structure and organization. We talked about protection. We talked about the fact that it helps us move because muscle is attached to it. And then outside of those mechanical properties, being that the bone is an organ, we talked about the fact that it also influences other structures in the body as well. So it's actually happens to be the site of red and white blood cell production. And we talked about the fact that it's a site of storage, and it stores lots of things, but one thing that it stores that's very important for our purposes is calcium. And that calcium can be then not only stored to give the bone strength, but can be released into the bloodstream and go to other various organs like muscles and nerves who use calcium for their own function. So hopefully by the end we figured out that the skeleton is pretty important, but we didn't quite make a lot of progress yet on how that relates to that weight bearing program that we've asked you to do. So let's see if we can take a step farther, a little bit closer to more getting a better understanding of that weight bearing program. Okay, so to talk about the specifics of the bone, I actually came across a kind of an interesting site. Let me make sure I get this right. The American Society for Bone and Mineral Research. And I liked some of the descriptions that they had on there. I thought they were well done. They talked about the fact that we have this amazing material that the bone is made of. And in some ways it's as strong as cast iron. On the other hand, it's kind of light and airy like wood. So how does that happen? How do we make this? It's actually, the outer structure of it is kind of this, what we call compact bone, which is very much like what it sounds like. It's the more durable structure. And on the inside we have the cancellous bone, which is airier and lighter and has holes in it and provides that lightness to the bone. So what is this stuff made of? Okay, so how do we get this material put together? Well, basically bone is comprised of 2 general concepts. One is protein and the other is minerals. And the 2 minerals that are really important are calcium and phosphorus. And those 2 components come together to basically make this structure. And so I liked on their site, they talked about if they would bring together some string and some glue and some plaster and put that all together, that they could sort of mimic kind of how a bone is made. So I didn't have all of those things, but I kind of had the general idea. So what I did was I went and got some string, and so this is the string here, and the string represents the protein, one of the collagen matrix. And so these strings of protein basically come together, and then what I put on the other side to represent after the fact, I used basically flour and water, and I put the flour and water mixture in between the fibers of the collagen, in between the collagen strings, and then what I came up with when it dried was a structure that looked very much like bone, and acts very much like bone. So it gives it form and shape, and yet it's obviously much more durable than this side is. So that's kind of in general how a bone is put together. So okay, so now we kind of know, we're getting closer, aren't we, to how this weight bearing program thing works. But one thing we need to think about is if we're involved in a weight bearing program where we're trying to promote stronger bones, we obviously have something that might be going amiss. So I brought a little demonstration to kind of talk about, in general, what might be happening in some scenarios. And I want you to think about the bone right now as being kind of a recipe. And so I've picked a bagel to represent normal functioning bone. It's strong, it's relatively resilient, it doesn't deform very easily, it does a good job doing what it's supposed to do, basically, okay? But if we had a little bit more protein or a little bit less mineral, we would change the recipe, basically. And instead of this, we might have something like this piece of wheat bread. And so with more protein, remember the protein are these wiggly strings, right? So with more protein in it, I have this very pliable bread, but I have bread that doesn't really hold shape very well, right? So it starts to deform a little bit. Okay, so that's one direction we could go. We could change the recipe the other direction though, right? We could have more mineral and less protein. So in that case, we would have not very many strings and a whole bunch of this harder material, the calcium and phosphorus. In this case, it's my flour paste. But so if we had that ratio, then we'd have a recipe that looks a little bit more like this. So now when I go to press on this bone, if this were bone, I have something that breaks easy, which would fracture easy, right? So depending on how the recipe looks, we get different behaviors of the material that would be a result of that change in structure. So that kind of gives us at least a general idea of what might be some of the influences that are going to be involved in our weight bearing program. Now, if we're really going to get an idea of how those forces, those weight bearing forces in the program are helping, we obviously have to talk about the fact that somehow this bone structure has to be changing, right? And so in the third module, what we're going to talk about is how the bone actually can be changed, for good or for bad. And so we've basically now covered the importance of the skeleton in general. In this module, we talked about how the bone itself is put together. And now in both cases, we're keeping things pretty simplified here. Remember, we're looking for big underlying concepts. And then in the next module, we're going to talk about how bone changes.